Alright, hey everyone. So, you might have seen a video I did on EX Judgment, which is the final EX skill in the game. Now that it's finally unlocked and we have all of the EX skills available, I figured it might be a good idea to go through all of the EX skills in the game and not really rate them, but more just talk about them, their uses, pros, cons, and my opinions on each one. Unfortunately, like, because of the cooldowns and stuff, I can't really show them off. Well, maybe I'll show off some of them, but yeah, we'll take a look. So here we go. So every single combat EX in the game is now unlocked. Now keep in mind that I do have Whisper of the Ancient Gods equipped. So all of my EXs, with the exception of Scorch, Winter, and Thunderclap, all have +2 to their current tier. So my Judgment is effectively tier 3, for example. My Dark Sun is effectively tier 4, etc. So let's start off with the Godfather, and probably the highest, most frequently used, most powerful, most versatile EX skill in the entire game, Scorch. There's literally no reason to not use Scorch in any situation. Granted, there are reasons to use other EX skills, but Scorch is always a good option. In PvE, you're always going to be using Scorch, because, as you probably already know, it is a 30-second cooldown, which is the lowest cooldown out of any EX skill in the entire game, and it also reduces defense by 20%, deals damage, and also gives them burn ticks for 10 seconds. So, oh, and it also boosts your fire attack, so if you're a Blade Master or a fighter, this just makes you even stronger. So, I don't really need anything else to say about this one. This is just extremely strong. I pretty much always use it in PvE. I never use anything else in PvE. There's no reason to use anything else. In PvP, I don't use Scorch that much, but sometimes I will. But I think there is some more interesting EXs that can lead to some very, very fun and very useful scenarios, or, useful cases, that Scorch can't really handle. But for just raw damage and for pretty much any situation, this is the best EX in the game. I don't know what to tell you. So we're starting off very strong here. It also has pretty much an instant cast. There's almost no cast time for this thing. At the final tier, you might see there's a 50% chance to refresh the cooldown if you hit less than 3 targets. So, yeah, very strong EX. Alright, next let's look at Royal Fire. So Royal Fire is basically Scorch, but it's a AoE damage over time instead of a single damage. Now, it does deal more damage total, but it deals that damage over time. It's not instantaneous. Actually, no, it does. No, it does actually do that damage. So it does deal. Okay, so it deals slightly more damage at the start, right? So, actually, no. Okay, retract everything I said. It deals less damage at the start, but deals more damage over time. That's kind of what I was talking about. It also reduces their damage dealt by 10% and weakens their defense by 20%. So you might think, like, wow, this seems like a better version because it now also reduces the damage the enemies deal. Yes, but no. And because I can show this one off because it has a very low cooldown. Here's the reason why I don't like Royal Fire, and why a lot of people also don't like Royal Fire. The radius is very small, and for a class like Reaper that is a ranged-oriented class, you're not going to be very in close proximity to people. So, all in all, not all that useful. Now, for a class like Fighter, it's not too bad. Blade Master, again, it's not too bad, but you're losing the fire attack damage from Scorch, but you're also taking slightly less damage, so it's kind of a trade-off. The cooldown isn't much more. It's only 45 seconds over 30 seconds, which is still very fast. So it's not too bad. So let's look at the higher tiers here. So mine's at tier 5. At tier 6, it lowers all your damage received by 20%. So that's pretty great. At tier 7, you gain super armor, I think, at tier 7. Or the super armor duration of enemies is reduced. I'm not sure what that means. Super armor is reduced. I don't know what that means. Either your super armor time is reduced, which would be terrible, or you gain super armor. I don't know. And at tier 8, there's a 10% chance to trigger Scorch every time the damage is dealt by burning. That's pretty fucking good. I mean, at tier 8, this thing can become a monster, but... The other problem with Royal Fire is until you get the dual defense lower at tier 5, this EX is just bad. There's no reason to not use Royal Fire over Scorch until he gets to tier 5. And then maybe you can think about it, but yeah, that's the biggest issue with this ability. Low AoE radius, and Scorch is just better. Just faster cooldown, more damage up front, that kind of thing. Okay, so we're gonna skip Dark Sun because we're gonna do the Juggernaut EXs, as I call them, at the very end. So next is Winter. Now, at first, Winter was very, very strong. Then people learned how to use super armor. Then Winter became almost useless. Now Winter's getting stronger again because it's getting a lot of fucking debuffs. At high tiers, Winter's actually going to be very strong. So what does it do? So when you afflict an enemy with it, it basically places a cold debuff around them, which slows their movement speed, makes them take constant damage, and also, what does that do? Oh, it increases the damage to tick, yeah, for 10% every tick, right. So, it explodes after 8 seconds, and if it will freeze them if they don't have super armor, or any immunity to freeze, right? So, Winter, unfortunately, is not super hot because of the fact that most people are just going to trigger super armor as soon as it ends, because you can see when it ends. But where Winter gets interesting is at the higher tiers. At tier 6, when EX Winter freezes a target, it then spreads to other targets around it. That's pretty cool. And at tier 7, this only triggers once, by the way. It can't trigger to the people who get frozen after that. And at tier 7, you can actually cast it on 2 targets at once. So, at tier 6 and 7, using this in Battlegrounds is not a bad idea. And I know people who really do like this ability, and I can understand why. This movement slowdown effect is pretty drastic. But, again, if you're going up against a class that has a lot of super armor, it kind of renders it useless. Now, again, it does have a good cooldown. It has 60 seconds, which is longer than Royal Fire and Scorch. So, I prefer Scorch just because of the more damage. Some people do like using Winter. Again, maybe at tier 6 and 7, when it has those additional effects, it might be interesting. But, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it in its case. I did say it is getting stronger, and it is. Because of the additional effects at tier 6 and 7, and also the movement slow is pretty significant. So there's that. Okay, Vortex. I love Vortex. This is my go-to defensive skill, and it all really has to do with the fact that you absorb a decent amount of damage, you deal damage when it explodes, and you also gain a 15% cooldown reduction, which is fantastic for classes like Blade Master and Fighter, or heck, even Reaper to an extent. Really useful, very useful, and then also, you might also notice that it slows them when it explodes, and it also reduces their endurance recovery speed by 100%. So, it's got pretty good effects on it. It's a very good and quickly recovering 60 seconds defensive EX skill. I like it a lot. I tend to use it when I'm playing a more defensive role, or when I'm going up against tougher opponents that I need to take some extra hits with. I will generally use this. I like it a lot. It's one of my go-to EX skills for Battlegrounds when I need something on a shorter cooldown. Now, at tier 7, this is where this gets interesting. The release of it, the breaking of it, releases Winter to 1 target randomly. So there's that. And at tier 8, the shield effectively explodes every 7 seconds. So it triggers for how long? 20 seconds? So 2 times. It'll explode 2 times during the duration. So yeah, Vortex. Very good EX. I do like it. Next is Tyrants Eye. Tyrants Eye, unfortunately, like, It's very situational. It can be good sometimes, but the main issue with it is that 90-second cooldown. I feel like if Tyrant's Eye was on a 1-minute cooldown or like a 75-second cooldown, I think it would be more viable. But because it's on a 90-second cooldown, it's not exactly the greatest. It does do decent damage, and it pushes enemies away. So what it does is you... Here, I can show this one off, I guess, too. Because this one, a lot of people need to understand. So... there you go. So you stand still and you blow enemies away. So it knocks enemies like away from you, pushes them back. And you also gain super armor during the effect as well, during the casting. It also, when you cast it, gives you this buff here called Blessing of Wind for 2 minutes. So you gain 20% endurance recovery and 10% dodge chance. And if you activate Tyrant's Eye again while this buff is still active, so you have 30 seconds to activate it again, you'll gain an additional buff. The problem is whenever you tend to use Tyrant's Eye, you tend to die. A lot of the times I find when I use Tyrant's Eye, because, again, I'm a ranged class, I don't find it all that useful. Pushing enemies away like that, it just leaves you open, and by the time I try to cast another one, I'm dead. So, you know, maybe if you're playing a melee class, you might like this one. Some people like to use it in bombs, but the problem is there's just better EXs to use in bombs to get people off the circle. I tend to like it sometimes for battlegrounds, but again, there's just better EXs that just do more control effects than I think this one does. So that's kind of the issue with it. At the final tier, it reduces the casting time, which is good. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of it. Here, I can show you the additional buff right now. So here's the additional buff, which only lasts 15 seconds. Your movement speed is increased by 50% and increases your cooldown by 3,700 points. And your, I believe that's crit or multi-strike. I don't remember. Let's take a look. That is your... Yes, your crit. So, not all that great. Dustbuster. This is another very popular one. It's basically the tanking EX, because when you activate it, enemies around you are slowed. You gain 4,000 enhanced speed defense and M defense, which does nothing. That's like basically nothing, right? Worthless points. So you slow enemies down, increase your own movement speed, and your damage taken is reduced by 40%, but you also deal 30% less damage. So this is basically to enhance your tanking, especially if you're playing Blade Master and you're playing tank. Every 6 seconds, also, it releases a hurricane that knocks enemies into the air. I've never seen this happen, honestly, but a lot of people do like Dustbuster because of the movement speed increase and also the slow and the massive damage reduction. I prefer Vortex because of the cooldown, and that's just me. But a lot of people really do like Dustbuster. So at Tier 7, you can use it while being controlled, and at Tier 8, when after the hurricane takes effect, it actually causes a Tyrant's Eye, which is very interesting. I think at Tier 8, Dustbuster might be the go-to defense, but we'll see. Alright, next, Thunderclap. I don't know what to say about Thunderclap. It's not all that good. So here's what it looks like. So that was it actually exploding immediately. Which is kind of rare for that to happen. So Thunderclap is a very underwhelming EX, mostly because everything that it does is heavily reliant on the opponent not having super armor, right? So it deals a decent amount of damage within a 5-meter radius and causes a delay for 2.5 seconds. There's a 20% chance to detonate immediately, so it does the full damage, and a 30% chance to pierce the target, which deals double damage. Again, 20%, 30%. So not exactly the greatest chance in the world. I'm going to wait for the cooldown to reset. Maybe we can look at it. See what it looks like sometimes. Now, what it also does is it causes your next 5 attacks to be muted with electrical charge, which deals AoE. So this is what it looks like normally when it doesn't explode. But you can see I also have this buff here called Hidden Thunder. For 15 seconds, I think, or 20 seconds, you're imbued with Thunder. Your next 5 attacks will deal AoE Thunder damage. So, interesting, right? Can be useful when doing some AoE damage in a group, but otherwise, Thunderclap, it's very, again, it's a situational EX. The low chances is what kills this EX. If it was a higher chance, maybe it would be good. But, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think there's a better Thunder EX, which we'll see in a second. So, yeah. Now, at Tier 7... when it detonates, it leaves behind an ion field, again, with a 30% chance per second for affected enemies to be struck by lightning. That could be interesting. But again, low chance. So, it's a very meh EX overall, in my personal opinion. Meanwhile, Minefield is a very good EX. Minefield, at least if you're playing as a Reaper... Reaper, Soul Dancer, or a Assassin. What Minefield does is it's an AoE trap, basically. Like that. And enemies that are in the area will take constant damage and also inflict delay, and if they're in the area for more than 2 seconds, they are then silenced. Again, if they don't have super armor. But it deals pretty good damage over time. It deals damage very quickly, and it has a decent radius, as you saw. I use this ability a lot in Tide of Gods, and bombs, because it's a great control ability that allows you to silence enemies and also deal damage to them. It also increases the magic damage they take by 15%. So not as good as, say, like Scorch or Royal Fire, but it's still pretty significant, because you can also silence enemies as well. So I think that's why it's not 20%, because that would just be overpowered. 75-second cooldown, really wish that was a minute, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, at Tier 6, a Thunder of Doom burst every 5 seconds, making Thunderclap completely irrelevant. At Tier 7, the radius is increased by 5 meters, which is pretty freaking great. And at Tier 8, oh, wait. Oh, at Tier 7, it also goes down to 1 second in the field for silence, not 2 seconds. Wow, that's crazy. And then at Tier 8, let's see. Oh, it reduces the duration of the super armor. So, yeah, Minefield, amazing. Especially at the higher tiers, this ability is going to be fucking amazing. I love Minefield. I use it a lot. It's a great, great one. Okay. Creed. What's not to say about Creed that makes it good? Now, Creed obviously doesn't deal damage, but it's the best debuff. It's the best debuff EX in the game, and a lot of people really like Creed because Creed is basically the counter to Reapers. Because Reapers really don't like being silenced because they can't really do much. Especially if they're caught out in cat form with the super armor off, they're fucked. Because switching to Raven form doesn't give you super armor, so they have to double jump. You know, they have to jump dash. But as you might notice, Creed also increases their endurance consumption, so it's a very, very fun EX. So it silences all enemies during the duration, reduces their defense by 1,400 points, which again is nothing, and reduces their crit AP multi-strike by 2,000 points, which is, again, is not much. They can't dodge, and their movement speed is reduced, and their endurance consumption is increased. So yeah, this is a very strong EX. A lot of people use Creed in a lot of situations. The only problem with Creed is that it's a self-cast. So it casts the field under you. But you might notice it lasts for a goddamn long time, has a good radius, and like I said, silences for a long-ass time. So, even though it does cast under your feet, it's a very strong EX. Very, very strong, very useful in team play. At Tier 6, it reduces their elemental defense. Always good. At Tier 7, let's see. Oh, the radius is increased. Makes it even better, right? And then at Tier 8, let's see. Oh, if an enemy player dies in the field, then you get an 8-second cooldown reduction. It can go up to, and it can stack up to 3 times. So that's pretty interesting, but not super useful. So yeah, Creed, love it, great. Holy Judgment. Holy Judgment, another EX that starts out really bad, but gets really, really, really strong later on. Right now, it's okay, but it's not at its full potential yet. That will be at tier 6, because it can get rid of super armor. But right now, it's okay. It deals decent damage. It also deals, inflicts delay. And it also deals continuous damage to enemies that are hit by it for 5 seconds. It weakens a single target's defense by 20%. A single target's, which is the target you picked if they get hit by it, which I will show in a second. You can dodge this. And decreases their crit, AP, and multi-strike by 10%. Again, 10%, not a flat number. This is a very good 1v1 EX. And this last effect is kind of bad. If you kill an enemy during the time that the skill is active, your HP recovers by 6%, which you might think is good, but it's not. It's not that great. Not a lot of HP recovery, and the odds of you killing someone during that effect, it's kind of meh. At tier 5, the skill damage is increased by 30%. It doesn't say here, but that's what it does. At tier 6, like I said, it can get rid of super armor. At tier 7... when you kill the enemy during that time, you regain HP, and the enemy also self-destructs, which will then spread to them, similar to Winter. At tier 8... what does that do? Inflicts additional damage to targets with less than 50% HP, and when the target's life is lower than 20%, the maximum amount of damage is dealt. So it deals more damage the lower health they have. Again, I love Holy Judgment. My issue with it is that it can be dodged. So it's a target only EX. So I can show this off really quick if I go to Siberia. So let's go to Siberia, and I want to show this EX off, because this EX can actually be dodged, which is not the greatest thing in the world. Where am I going? Am I going the right way? I think I'm going the right way. Hold on. Where the hell am I? It should be over here, right? I have no idea what my game's doing right now. Hold on a second. Can you teleport? Can you do anything? Oh my god. Okay. This is what happens when you record live, people. So there's no training dummies in this game, as everyone knows, so you have to go to this level 120 monster over here. Here we go. I found it. Yeah, this guy right here. So this is the guy we use to test out skills and stuff. So here's what it looks like. So that sword that drops down, so a ring goes around the target that's selected by it, but that sword that comes down can be dodged, which completely nullifies pretty much everything this EX does. But with that being said, it has some very strong effects in 1v1s or against targets that can't move that fast. But there you go. Someone can maybe prove me wrong that it can't be dodged, but I've been able to dodge it before. I've seen other people dodge it. So there you go. Okay, Fire Tornado. I'm not a huge fan of it. And let me explain why. I feel like Fire Tornado originally was very good until we got the Juggernaut EXs. And now it's kind of not as good. Because, number one, aiming this thing is a bitch. Number two, the cast time takes forever. Number three, it moves very fast, so the damage isn't all that great. And the aerial never seems to want to trigger for some reason. That being said, the damage does increase if they do more, if it deals more damage to them, blah, blah, blah. Can I show this one off? Is the cooldown done yet? Yes. Okay, so here's what Tornado looks like. You don't need a target for this. It's literally where you're facing. So it moves very fast. it's great to send it to a crowd. And that's pretty much it. It has to disperse amongst a bunch of players. So it's good if you want to deal some crowd damage quicker than the Juggernaut EXs. But, you know, it is what it is. I've never really liked it because I just find it leaves you vulnerable. It's annoying to cast it. And I like the other ones are more fun anyway. At tier 5, each damage dealt deals burn effect, which deals 150% remaining rare effect. I don't even know what that does, but whatever. At tier 6, deals heavy damage continuously, 50% chance to grant yourself 30% movement speed or 20% crit damage. So that's interesting, I guess. At tier 7, the duration is increased by 60%. At tier 8, I think it deals aerial? I'm not entirely sure. It looks like it deals aerial, but it should already inflict aerial, so maybe it deals more damage. I don't know. So that's Fire Tornado. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the big boys. So Dark Sun, Glacier, Majesty, and Judgment are what we call the Juggernaut EXs. These EXs are absurdly powerful, but also have pretty much double the cooldown of Fire Tornado, which is 90 seconds, which I think has the longest cooldown out of all these EXs. They all have 180 second, 190 second, 240 second cooldowns. So we're going to take a look at these. These EXs are notoriously strong, but again, it's their long cooldowns, but they're very fun to use. I mean, come on. Dark Sun is the first one you're going to unlock, I think. It's either Dark Sun or Majesty. I don't remember which one. It's one of them. I think it's Majesty, actually. Let's look at Dark Sun first. So Dark Sun, when you activate it, it has a little bit of a cast time, and you gain super armor. And basically what it does is it pulls all enemies into you, and then it launches them up into the air and deals lots of damage and then blows them away. You also, at this tier, you gain a shield that absorbs a lot of damage. And that's about it. So, can I show this one off? I want to show at least Dark Sun off, because this one's pretty fucking awesome. So here's what Dark Sun looks like here. So it has a pretty long cast time, but when you activate it, wow. It deals a lot of damage. Now, obviously, he's immune to aerial, but it would knock enemies into the air and then blow them away. So, a lot of damage on this one. It's really, very good. Unfortunately, so when we first unlocked Dark Sun, it was the most damaging EX in the game. Now it's not. But when we get to higher tiers, this thing is going to be an absolute monster. And we'll look at that. So at tier 5, enemies that suffer the last attack from Black Sun will suffer continuous damage for 10 seconds and also have reduced healing effects. At tier 6, the damage dealt by Dark Sun or Black Sun, whatever, is increased by 100%. So it deals now double damage. That's insane. At tier 7, once the casting is finished, player receives no retreat, which they will lose 2% of their HP every second, but also increase their damage by 30%. So it basically turns into a suicide EX, which it kind of already is, which is great. And at tier 8, you gain anti-death while in the no retreat state. So it turns into even more of a kamikaze EX. So yeah, Dark Sun at the higher tiers, that damage is going to be crazy, let me tell you. Okay, next up is Majesty. Majesty is a very interesting EX. Basically think of it as a long-ranged and more powerful Creed, but without the silence. So what it does is you cast on a target, and it's an AoE ranged, and it slows all enemies down until they're bound, and it also deals more damage the lower their movement speed is. Once their movement speed is 0 and they're bound, it deals additional 50% damage. You also gain a shield after using it for 5 seconds. I love Majesty. It's usually my go-to one of these Juggernaut EXs. It's just very useful, has a really good debuff. That debuff is incredibly annoying, and deals a lot of damage in quite a large radius as well. It's a very useful EX, slows a lot of enemies down, costs them in their tracks, deals a lot of damage. Great stuff. At tier 5, I think you gain immunity to control effects. Yes. So at tier 5, you gain super armor. So at tier 4, you just get I think it's tier 3, yeah, you just get the shield. But at tier 5, you also gain super armor when you cast it. At tier 6, 30% chance to inflict knockdown, which deals a bonus 20% damage. At tier 7, there's an aftershock effect after you release it. So it kind of deals like kind of more damage over time. And at tier 8, there's a 100% chance to cause knockdown. So there you go. Very strong, very good control EX. Love it a lot. Then is Glacier. Glacier has a 180-second cooldown. I want to show this one off because this one is pretty insane as well. So what Glacier does, it's a self-cast. Glacier has a very long cast time. I think it's actually the longest cast time in the entire game. Maybe tied with Dark Sun, I'm not sure. So it's a self-cast, which means it's more of it's a kamikaze, like similar to Dark Sun. But this actually does more damage than Dark Sun. But it has a lot longer cooldown. I mean, initially it does more damage than Dark Sun. So here's the cast. Again, very long cast time. And you can die during the cast and it won't activate. It triggers a field, which goes around, expands like this. Deals lots of damage over time, as you can see. The damage is crazy. And it also freezes enemies and does some other stuff too, which I will show. So as you can see, it lingers for quite a long time as well. So a lot of people have been using Glacier for bombs, for Tide of Gods, for areas where you're going to be choke-holding enemies. So it deals a lot of fucking damage. So what was it? 58961 1006088. So does that deal almost 5 times the damage? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Wow, yeah, it does. So Glacier does. Yeah, there you go. Now, enemies on top of the effect will receive a move speed reduction effect, a increased cooldown by 30%, so their cooldown time is increased, and it reduces their damage dealt by 20%. Now, the one counter to this is that it actually is affected by your warmth level. So a lot of people like to drink, that Russian tea, in order to negate the effects of this. But of course, that disappears when you die. So, and then obviously they're frozen. At tier 4, every enemy within the Glacier will receive reduced healing. At tier 5, it increases their water damage taken by 30%, which is pretty much useless unless you're a Soul Dancer. At tier 6, while you're on top of the Tundra, your own elemental defense is increased, and you take 20% less physical damage. At tier 7, your cooldown speed, while you're on the field, your cooldown reduction is increased by 20%. And at tier 8, after Tundra exceeds the maximum, enemies will immediately be frozen if they leave the AoE. Tundra is very strong. Very, very strong. I think until Dark Sun gets to tier 5, tier 6, tier 7, Glacier is way stronger. This thing is just crazy, the amount of damage it does. And the debuffs it gives and stuff like that. The only issue with it, number 1, 180-second cooldown. But number 2, it's a self-cast. Unlike Majesty, which is ranged. So you have to keep that in mind. You can die very, very easily when you're trying to cast like an emergency Glacier, and now you don't have anything for 180 seconds. So, yeah. Finally, the last EX skill in the game, the one that I already showed off, is Judgment. Judgment, you would think, is the strongest EX in the game, and it is if it's at high tier, and if you're attacking someone with low HP. Otherwise, Judgment is not so great. And the reason is because it's a 240-second cooldown, which is absurd. Now, at the lower tiers, at tier 1 to, I think, tier 5, no, until tier 6 even, Jesus Christ. Judgment, like, at tier 3, I'm telling you right now, Judgment is very not great. The damage is mediocre. I mean, the damage is good, but they have to be at lower HP to really deal the most damage. And the long cooldown is just, it's a huge problem. Now, at tier 4, the damage is increased by 20%, so probably will be a little better. At tier 5, enemies below 20% HP take 35% more damage instead of 25% more damage. At tier 6, if the enemy has less than 5% HP, there's a chance to instantly kill them. At tier 7, when the EX is released, it leaves behind a field, which deals damage. That's very strong. And at tier 8, when the field is left on, when like the AoE is left on the field after the casting is done, players who have less than 10% HP will be instantly killed. So, instant kill, lots of damage. Holy shit, that sounds great. And yeah, it is. It's an extremely fun EX to use, but that cooldown, man, let me tell you. I love Judgment because of how fun it is, but I'll tell you, it is not practical at all. It's extremely situational. It is an EX you use, you switch to it. So, what I do a lot of the times is I will start the match with like Minefield, Majesty, Vortex, Creed, something like that. And then if I need like a quick comeback, if I see, oh, the enemies are really weak, I will switch over to Judgment. Now, obviously, the problem is you have now off cooldown for 240 seconds, but you have the ability to use other EXs before then. So a lot of the times people will tend, and I tend to do this, like I said, is I will start out with another EX. Scorch even, maybe. Or Tyrants Eye. Something with a lower cooldown, and then switch over to Judgment. Even Majesty or Glacier. Because their cooldowns are so much lower than this. So, for those of you who didn't see the video, here's what it looks like. It's an instant cast, and it's a cast on yourself. So, instant cast, at your feet. As you can see, doesn't deal a whole lot of damage by itself. It's when they're at lower HP, and it's also the defense decrease effect. So this is basically a finishing EX. When you do use it on a bunch of low enemies, dear God, it just kills everything, right? Like it does, it's insane. But normally, you're like, that was mediocre, and now I have nothing for 240 seconds. So, yeah. Not all that fantastic. So that's all the EXs in the game. Very long video, I know, but trust me, this is pretty good information, I hope. So if I had to go over the most powerful EXs, Scorch is still the best one. Like, there's just no contest. Out of the normal EXs. For debuffing, you want to go with Creed, or you want to go with Minefield, or you want to go with Majesty. For defense, Dustbuster or Vortex. For pure damage, Scorch, Glacier, Judgment, I guess. Majesty is good damage. Oops. Dark Sun is fun, is good damage at like tier 5, tier 6. And in terms of Juggernaut EXs, what do I recommend? Majesty or Glacier. Right now, Majesty or Glacier. At higher tiers, maybe Dark Sun as well. Judgment, like I said, is just very situational. You should switch into it, not start with it. Use it when you see an opportunity to use it. Otherwise, it's so situational. It's so just... It's unfortunate, but it's a very fun EX to use when you do get a huge, like, triple or quad kill or whatever. Anyways, guys, I hope you found this informative. That's all the EXs in the game. and my opinions on them.